What up, world, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the New Leaves podcast series. I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Dr. Yu, who received her PhD in Environmental Health Sciences from New York University. Now, for the past decade, Dr. Yu and her team have been closely monitoring and studying air quality in areas throughout Pennsylvania following the closure of a coal coking operation. Now, without a doubt, the science behind this study can get a little complicated, and I can't think of anyone better suited to explain it than Dr. Yu herself. So with that said, let's get to the podcast.
All right, Dr. Yu.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me this morning. I really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to learn more about your studies and the different work that you've done in the field of climate change. So in particular, the one study that I wanted to talk to you about today was, and correct me if I'm getting this incorrect here, but an interrupted time series of cardiovascular health benefits of a coal coking plant operation closure.
Yes.
Correct?
Yep.
And what this was an attempt to validate the fact that reduction in air pollution exposure produces human health benefits, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a lot of questions that I want to kind of dive into here, but before we do that, just for my sake and for the sake of our listeners, can you give us a brief explanation of what this research was about?
Yeah. So basically what we did for this research is to assess the cardiovascular health benefits that happened after the closure of a coking operation. Coking is a process of coal purification. We all know probably a few different types of coke that is bad for our health, but this one in particular is the purified form of coal. In this process called coking, it is the raw coal is fed into basically an industrial setting, and it's given high temperature and high pressure without oxygen. So all the impurities in coal, such as heavy metals, some volatile organic compounds, will come out from the coal and leaving the purified form that is called coke. And the highly purified version, the coke, will be used later in steel making because it produces higher temperature. And all the impurities that is rendered out in this process will go just released into the air. That is the emissions actually from a coking industry. What we did here is we looked at the closure of a coking operation in Pittsburgh. The Shenango coking plant, it closed in January 2016. It's been operating there for like a century or more. And that closure, we looked at it and the health, actually the cardiovascular emergency department visits before its closure and after its closure in the area near the where the plant was. And we looked to see if the actual cardiovascular emergency visits were decreased after the actual operation stopped. And that is basically what we did for the interrupted time series. We followed the trend before and see if there is a trend change afterwards. And there is. So after the closure, we saw an immediate decrease of emergency department visits due to cardiovascular disease. The week in the model, the week right after the closure, we saw a 30-ish% reduction of visits. And then in the years to come, we followed the trend for 3 years. We saw a gradual trend that is after the 30% decrease, it kept decreasing over years. So it's a dramatic change produced by the closure of that operation.
Awesome. Well, it definitely is important work that you're doing, right?
Thanks.
So, on behalf of myself and all the other climate enthusiasts, thank you very much for undertaking this study. So, first question I have here is for something that seems so obvious to me, that releasing air pollutants would have an adverse effect on human health. Why do you feel that it's important or even necessary to be able to scientifically prove this?
Yes, so it actually is very interesting because the air pollution standards we currently have for PM 2.5, we look at total micrograms. That is to say, we're trying to reduce it. We all know, like air pollution, particulate matter, it is bad for health, and we evaluate it on a per microgram basis. So it is actually difficult to say, like specifically, that is these air pollution from these industrial sources. That is what we really would like to regulate, because we have other sources around. In the 10 microgram, for example, in New York City, we have things from traffic, we have salt that is blown from the sea, we have industrial emissions, and sometimes we have wildfire smoke. That is what brings our air pollution PM out up to like 200 micrograms. And when we regulate things, there are priorities. And one major purpose of this study is to say, like, some of the sources are particularly toxic, and that's what we should actually put more standards on and emphasize our climate action on to produce more health benefit.
Okay. So are we able to use this information to convince our government officials, both federal and state level, to enact these sort of climate regulations?
Well, so far the major actions has still been in like lowering the total microgram standard. We have a revised guideline that came out in February this year, lowering the air pollution PM standards. But still, we're working on the math. A few directions we could actually go, perhaps in the future, is looking at source and size distribution, but that's going to be a future step. Previous research we've been doing over decades have proven that air pollution is negatively associated with health, and we are lowering these standards, and we are trying to like lower the emissions from these industrial sources. So what we are doing in my study is we call it accountability study. So we want to assess the actual health benefits. So we give credit to these actual actions we're taking. And as long as we're proving that what we're doing right now is actually producing benefits, I think we can kind of encourage more action to come in the future.
Awesome. So you mentioned heavy metals and a couple other pollutants. What are the specific air pollutants that come off of a coking operation?
Yep, there are actually quite a lot. We have different kind of, well, for one thing, coal and coal-related emissions are high in sulfur and arsenic and cadmium. Arsenic and cadmium are known carcinogens. Cocaine in particular also comes with organic compounds, for example, benzene, which is known carcinogen. And in the process, there are quite a bit of hydrogen sulfide released. That is the gas that is known for its rotten egg smell. And hydrogen sulfide is oxidized into sulfur dioxide. Also, the process also releases quite a bit of sulfur dioxide too. And sulfur dioxide is a known irritant for airways, so asthma and COPD. So all those kind of health outcomes are seen near not only coking operations, coal-fired power plants, and other coal-related industries.
Okay, so it goes beyond just cardiovascular health in general. It goes into cancers and any other type of...
Yep, so we looked at cardiovascular in this particular study. The other health outcomes we've also looked at, and we're working on a manuscript to publish in the future. We've looked at pediatric asthma outcome. The trend is very similar to what we're seeing in cardiovascular. The pediatric asthma cases were rising before the closure, and right after the closure happened, it dropped right off the shelf, and then it kept going down over years. And also, we looked at respiratory visits, which is a little bit more complex. We see a immediate decrease, about 20% right after the closure, but there is an overall increasing trend over the years. That trend did not change that much, but we did see the cases of asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases going down over years, which are directly related to sulfur dioxide and other irritants for the airway.
Okay. Would you say that there's a potential that there would be a positive change for mental health as well?
Well, that's a very interesting question. There was actually an hypothesis before our study. People have been looking at the year before and the year after the closure, and they're seeing very small micrograms of air pollution decrease, like 1 or 2 micrograms in total. But the health benefit is so large, and people are saying, could it be just is all in their head? They're feeling like the environment is much better, so they're happier, and they're not really getting that many cases of cardiovascular cases or respiratory cases. Well, we did look at some mental health outcome. In particular, we looked at the mood disorder in hospitalizations. So we did see a gradual improvement of their mental health status over time. It is very gradual. It did not really change the week right after or the year right after. But in general, people living in that area, they're feeling like at least the mood is better.
Okay, awesome. And do you think that there is potential to use either the information gathered from this study or perhaps a study very similar to prove that there are beneficial impacts towards plants and wildlife?
I think there is for plants and wildlife. Well, that area itself is heavily industrialized, and coking operation does not only release pollution into the air but also into the water system. So a closure of that in a longer time, I wouldn't say like 1 or 2 years is enough, but a more general improvement of the environment around it will see like benefits in the environment and wildlife.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think that's an exciting potential to be able to have multiple avenues of saying that this is an effective way of changing the health aspects of everything on a planetary level.
Yes.
You know? Would you say that the majority of these coking operations are hosted in rural communities, or are they suburbanized, or where exactly are they established?
We did look at in this kind of setting is the Pittsburgh is known for its being historically a very industrialized area, and there are a few coking plants in Pittsburgh region. This one is in a little bit northwestern direction of Pittsburgh on the river. It is suburban, and also there is a larger one that was previously owned by U.S. Steel. I think it's now Nippon Steel. It is slightly in the south of Pittsburgh. Also, it is in a town, so I would say slightly suburban. But the population density is not like as dense as in the center of the city, but there are still population around, and there are also, when we talk about it, we think of the social injustice a little bit. Environmental justice is a concern there. So the neighborhood near it usually is not of very high socioeconomic status, So the actual health effect and the health care they could actually receive, plus the air pollution they're getting, the effects usually compounding.
That was one of my next questions, actually. Good job. Would it be fair to say that the communities surrounding these are pretty much comprised of more lower income families?
Yes, the income. Yes, we did look at the social demographic characteristics when we do this kind of research. The community is comprised of higher percentage of lower income families and also higher percentage of non-white communities in the area.
Do you think there's a reason behind that, or?
Yes, well, first of all, it is a area that was historically very heavily industrialized, and the actual affordability of housing in the area, and also the actual community, the green space they have, the different resources they have in the community. If we compare it with the areas around, so it is, I would say, both a historic reason and the current resources are playing factors in the actual composition of the community.
So throughout the study, you took data from multiple coking operations, not just the one in it's
Shenango.
Shenango.
Yes.
Thank you. But also in Clairton, right?
Yes.
Is the one in Clairton, is that still operational at this moment?
Yes, the one in Clairton is still operational and is actually a larger scale coking operation there. The actual production is higher than Shenango, and the Clairton operation is currently going through some kind of reformation. I know they closed the 3 most polluting batteries last year, but also the Clairton operation has been in a lot of controversies in the past 5-6 years. They had a major fire event at the end of 2018, and they seem to have a lot of violations of emission regulations after that, because it was the fixing of everything was never really completed.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, they kind of pushed through that era, that time period, instead of closing things down properly and then addressing the issues that were put in place.
So there were a lot of violations in the past years, and they've been fined quite a lot. If we look online, you'll see like millions of fine in place, and there has been settlements, and they're trying to reform the plant. But so far, they've closed down 3 batteries recently, and we're trying to see. We're trying to get data actually to see if that's producing health benefits or not.
Yeah, hopefully it is. So why exactly did you choose that particular plant as a control?
Well, it is part of the study design is to rule out the impossibles. So it is like walking into a room and you see a button, you push the button and the light goes off. Naturally, you will think that is the button that is controlling the light. That is our thought process for a logic deduction. But for scientific research, when we do research, we want control groups. We want perhaps some kind of room that there is a similar button, but we never push it. And we kind of want a room that is the light wasn't initially on at that time, and there is a button and no one touches it. So it is for a positive control. We use the Clairton plant that has been operating, and we want to see whether or not there is a background change in the area that could actually explain what is happening at Shenango. and it wasn't happening. So at Clairton, when the plant was still operating, the actual health status of the community did not change. So we see when the Shenango plant closed down in the area, there is a change. We could say that, okay, so we now know at this point, if there is no closure, the health will not change. When there is closure, the health will change.
And there was a third location that was chosen as a control, and that had
Negative control, yes. So there wasn't a coking operation nearby at all. So we look at the background trend and see if just at that time point, if anything has happened. There wasn't. So the conclusion is comparing with the positive control and the negative control, it is uniquely, specifically where the closure actually happened immediately, there is a decrease in cardiovascular cases.
So you're kind of ruling out that there wasn't just something in the air in Pittsburgh at that time that was causing people to become healthier.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So really being able to scientifically magnify on the fact that it was the closure of this coking plant that is increasing these health benefits.
And also we looked at the injuries, which is supposedly not directly related to exposure to air pollution. So that is what we call internal control, but it is just the same community. If we see at that point cardiovascular health improved, respiratory health improved, but injury did not change. So we will probably say like, okay, these two are known, we know they're related to air pollution, and we could contribute the actual health benefits to the decrease in air pollution.
Okay. So there was a couple acronyms while I was reading through your research that I just wanted to clarify on. First, what is the ITS method?
Okay, the ITS, the interrupted time series method, it is initially used for economic studies. A very simple example is if we look at stock market, if it keeps stable and at a specific time point there's a policy change or there's some kind of news and you see a sharp increase or a sharp decrease, that is what we call an interruption. So we follow a trend over time, and with interrupted time series method, we kind of estimate the actual trend change and immediate change after the interruption takes place, and we kind of quantify the change in trend longer time and the change that is immediate at the time of the interruption happening.
Okay. So you're using something that was primarily economic and now.
Yes. So, well, it is kind of the natural thinking process we all use in our daily life, but kind of mathematically model it.
Okay, cool. So the second acronym that I had questions about is, what is ACHD?
ACHD is the Allegheny County Health Department.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so their health department has air pollution monitors around, and it monitors the actual emissions of, not emissions, the actual particulate matter level and the SO2 level near both the Shenango plant and also the Clairton, that is the still operating coke plant.
So that was one of the methods you were able to gather data to determine.
Yeah, that's one set of monitors I used. I also used some EPA monitors that are actually measuring the trace metal levels around. So those monitors are run by the EPA, but slightly further away.
That's a good segue into my next question here.
Okay.
Is what was the process of gathering that sort of healthcare information? Did you have to go from hospital to individual hospital throughout the different zip codes? Or is there like a database where you're able to get all this information?
Well, the air pollution data are more readily available online. The EPA's air pollution monitoring data is publicly available on EPA's air database. And the Allegheny County's monitors, they are also available online. A little bit difficult to find, but they have annual reports if anybody is interested looking at the actual annual summaries of their monitoring results. For the health data, it is a little bit more complicated because first of all, health data could easily be a confidential or private data. So what we did is we have to go through a review process. For the emergency department business, we got it from the Pennsylvania Department of Health. They keep a syndromic surveillance database that actually has records of all the emergency department visits that is reported to their system.
Wonderful. So it's becoming very clear to me that you were successful in being able to prove conclusively that the closure of this coking operation had beneficial health aspects. Would you say that coking operations also contribute to global climate change?
Well, coking operations naturally releases climate warming gases. It releases CO2 and other volatile organic compounds, PAHs, and it contributes to the actual secondary formation of other climate warming gases. We did do a little bit of conversion and the analysis of that. I think per year, based on its production size, the Shenango coke plant is releasing as CO2 equivalent, I think it's around 1.3 million tons of CO2 equivalent, including its production and the products it actually produces later in their life cycle. That's the CO2 they will release. It is kind of a conservative estimate because we didn't really include the transportation of products and all the things on that way. But yes, they do, and in general, fossil fuel industry do. They release a lot of CO2 in general.
Yeah, definitely. They for sure do. So here in New York City, one of the things that many individuals, including myself, are advocating for is to have cleaner buildings.
Yes.
It is actually the residential buildings that inhabit New York City that contribute a lot of the air pollution in this area. Is this study something that we can bring to both the mayor of New York City and to current landlords within the city to convince them to continue that trend of greenifying the city's buildings here?
Well, in general, I would say we definitely want more studies to look at coal-fired power plants and other industries using fossil fuel. Coking operations, specifically the end product, is more used for steel making, so it's not directly to provide power to like buildings around us. But in general, if we look at other operations using a similar process and using coal combustion, definitely there is an urgent need. We actually downsize the fossil fuel combustion emissions just for the sake of environment and climate.
Wonderful. Do you know if there are any greener methods in which we can use to create steel or to do steel works?
Well, there are new technologies out there people are trying to do. The Clairton coal plant, which I used for positive control, they're trying to first is upgrading their existing batteries, and also, well, there are easier things like just installing scrubbers so it removes more sulfur dioxide that is released. that will actually just produce more immediate benefits to both health and climate. And the actual production process, I think people are developing new technologies for coking and for power, coal-fired power plants. We have different ways to produce power now. We don't necessarily have to use like coal-fired.
Okay. Is there technologies out there or currently out there or ones that are being implemented that might be able to sort of scrub the air that comes out of these or filter?
There actually are. It is actually already in place. It is just operating them and putting more in and making sure what is released into the air actually follows the regulation. That is kind of might be challenging for some of the industries out there. There are emissions they actually have from the doors of the actual coke oven that is not really closing properly, so it comes out of the leaks out the door. And also there are abnormal production times, so they know at some times it is actually not following the regulations, and we just need more control and more monitoring on those.
So, Dr. Yu, one of the terms that I've heard is a kind of like a counter argument to removing coal as a fuel source is something called clean coal. Does such a thing exist? Is that something that we can use?
Well, I'm not particularly familiar with the idea of clean coal.
So it's supposed to be a form of coal that isn't saturated with heavy metals or other types of harmful elements.
Well, then I will actually question about the cleaning process. How did they clean and get rid of the impurities from coal? Because it actually sounds like the coking process when they said purify it, or the terminology is pyrolysis. So it's a process they kind of purifies the coal, and that is what we actually are facing with in this particular study. The things released during the cleaning process is harmful to health.
Okay, so as far as you know, there is no natural source of coal that doesn't come with those types of impurities.
I don't really think there is a natural source of very pure form of coal.
Okay.
If there is, it's probably going to be very expensive and hard to get.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know because again, that's one of the arguments that I've heard in the past to continue using fossil fuels. And if we can educate individuals that is a bunch of malarkey, then the closer we come to making the change to something far more sustainable. So, in general, what would you say was your inspiration for originally undertaking the study?
Well, we were actually approached by Heinz Endowment, which is based in the Pittsburgh area. They wanted to look at whether or not there is actual health benefit produced after the closure. And because there was that study I mentioned a little bit earlier, just very briefly, there was a study they did looking at just the year before and after, saying there's only like 1 something microgram change in total air pollution. The health change is so big, we don't really think it is we don't really think that makes sense. That's more like the actual conclusion of the question is they really are reluctant to admit it is the change, the closure that produced such big health benefits. So the Heinz Endowments actually reached us in New York and asked if there is something we could do about this. So that is the actual how this project started. And from my and I kind of like detective stories.
Okay.
And this is kind of like a detective story. We look at a change and a health benefit, and we look at different possibilities and try to eliminate the impossibles and see what remains and see if we can make a causal inference there.
Okay. Would you say that it's that kind of inquisitive curiosity that drove you to get into climate science in the first place?
Yeah, yeah. And it is a diverse field, and everything is just so interwoven and very related to each other. And any action we take right now, we could see benefits and changes not only local, but also like elsewhere in the world, and benefits that will happen in like decades and even maybe further in the future. So it's actually a very inspiring area.
So you mentioned that you're originally from China.
Yes.
Do you believe that there is a need for this type of research over there as well?
Absolutely. It is very much needed, not only here in the United States, but also other places in the world. Plus, the air pollution is different everywhere in the world. The coal is different, what is released is actually different, the techniques are different. And it is not only China, and in general, there are countries that are on their way of getting more industrialized and improving their own life. And in that process, their CO2 emissions is definitely going up. And we need more research there, and also we need new technologies, not only here but also other places in the world, so that we produce a better future.
Yeah. So there's an opportunity to take what we've learned here, the mistakes that we've learned from here, and give that information to these up and coming countries so that they can just bypass that stage of initial air pollution.
Yeah, absolutely. We really learned a lot of lessons on our way here, and it is very, very useful information.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that we're just going to continue to learn more and more
as we always do.
Yeah. Perfection doesn't exactly seem to be one of human strong suits, but learning, on the other hand,
we learn.
Learning is something that we are very good at. So, what do you think are some of the best ways individuals can spread this message of the necessity for climate control and pollution control?
Well, we are trying to communicate our science in different ways. We do post on social media our findings, and also we are working with local organizations and human rights organizations to produce some of the reports or papers that is more easily understandable, not like pure mathematics or science terms. Also, I think one of the things that from the scientific community we could do is we need more of researchers like this one that is actually looking at a real life scenario, like a natural experiment kind of situation, and produce things, for example, figures that are easy to understand and share. And there are different ways we could do for science communication now. We could use different kind of media. We could do videos. We could do audios. We could do very good visuals. And it basically is I would say it is a difficult process to actually communicate science to everyone. But I think we're on the way there.
That's great. Yeah, I kind of always think of Bill Nye the Science Guy when I think about people who are able to articulate scientific findings and scientific research into something that is more than just understandable, but also entertaining. Going back to the ideology that human beings are exceptionally good at learning, I also believe that learning on an individual level is paired directly with self-interest, right? And it is only when things are able to clearly make sense that a person is able to interact with it and to care about it. So I think you're right. There's a bunch of avenues when it comes to social media, and hopefully you guys are able to explore every single one of those to be able to get your goals accomplished.
Yep. And also, I'd like to add there is, for example, our type of research we look at, instead of saying it's going to produce climate benefits in general, we try to look at local health benefits that people are able to immediately feel and see if they live in the area. Instead of saying it's going to produce, we're going to reduce the number of micrograms of CO2 that is in the air, which is people cannot really touch it. The actual climate change effect might be there. You will see wildfire smoke around. You might see more rain, but it's not as immediate as just a week or a month after that we see fewer cases of cardiovascular emergency department visits. So we tend to now kind of emphasize a little bit more on the actual local health benefit we're seeing, and then we add on to that there is climate co-benefit. So it's both immediate local, and also we're seeing climate benefits that is further in the future and could be beneficial to the entire world.
I think that's very smart. You're hitting kind of the two levels of human interaction and communication, as both individual and communal. So, bravo, that's fantastic. Are there any studies or researches that you're undergoing right now, or that you have planned for the future?
Well, as the second stage for this ongoing project, we are looking at Clairton Coke plant. They are going through a few different kind of ways they're trying to transform their productions, cleaning it up, not really closing it down yet, but they're trying to do more green technology, closing down those batteries that are giving out a lot of pollution, and maybe installing scrubbers on other ones. So we're trying to see if that is going to produce very good health benefit too. And also we are working with different kind of sources of emissions, not only fossil fuel, kind of pushing toward a health, at least monitoring system, air pollution monitoring system that is going to give us more information on what exact source is in the particulate matter around us. We did do a little bit of more work last summer, because summer is approaching again in New York City, on wildfire smoke. So we were also able to look at the fingerprints of wildfire-related particulate matter and compare their health effect with fossil fuel-related particulate matter. They actually produce different effects. So when it comes to regulating different types of particulate matter, we actually could use different standards because the health outcome is actually different. Instead of looking at them as a mixture of mass, things should technically be regulated or at least monitored separately.
Cool. And if people want to get involved or support you, how can they do that?
There are a few different approaches. One very easy thing everybody could actually do is there are portable little air monitors that you could actually get. So you could start monitoring the air right around you. There is Purple Air, and those kind of monitors have a shared data system that everybody's actual monitoring results will go all into that database. So there are studies, other scientists are also doing it, just looking at the monitored results from all these citizen scientists. And also, these kind of results would be very interesting if we want to look at specifically at a certain location at a certain time what is the air pollution level.
No, that'd be wonderful, and I would like to figure out how to use that app. That would be.
Yeah, so there are very little portable things you can actually put on your belt or just on your collar or something, and walk it around with you in the city, and you'll see like when you're walking the streets, the level of PMs goes up.
Oh, really? I wonder if it changes from borough to borough.
It does. We have my colleagues. We do some very interesting things. They cycle around the city on different avenues and see whether or not the PM actually are different. We have colleagues who sample New York City subway stations, and the levels in subway stations are high.
Okay. So, what do you envision the future of climate control and pollution control being?
Well, the good thing in the recent years is we really are taking some actions rather than just setting goals, and we are gradually getting there, I would say. It is still urgent. It is the goal we're trying to reach is still kind of challenging, but we're seeing it, especially in the past decades. In the past years, we are bending the emission curve. We are not really emitting as much as we predicted we would do like 10 or 15 years ago. And it is happening. We are making at least some of the efforts we're making are actually producing a future that is at least better than what we were thinking we would be in 20 years ago. And I would definitely love to see this keep going and try harder.
That's a good segue into one of my last questions I have for you. Is in your perfect world, what would be that future? What would that look like for you?
Well,
The most optimistic case that you can desire.
I personally am not very optimistic about it. It is very difficult to actually be very optimistic if you're a climate scientist. But it is climate change is happening, and we need to take action. We needed to take action already, but if we take action now, we could at least try to reduce the negative outcomes we've been predicting, and hopefully control the actual climate change in something that is not as bad as we have been imagining over the years. And also, the health benefits and the climate benefits, it's ours, it's in the future. So just take action and we'll do it.
Okay. This next question is a little bit theoretical, so please bear with me. There is a term known as terraforming. Do you believe that it is possible to take research such as the ones that you conducted to be able to change the atmosphere on a global level someday?
Well, it is, I would say, this kind of research we are doing, and there are more research like this, and we are making our voice there, and we hope we certainly would love to see that in the future there are more regulations made, or at least interventions made using this kind of information we generate and the findings we're seeing, and hopefully taking more action. And there is also, I would say, there is this kind of anxiety over climate change these years. And I hope people would actually look at these kind of science in general, and transform that kind of emotions of anxiety into like taking real actions. And hopefully these climate actions will actually produce more benefits.
I think that's a good desire. And I think it's actually very achievable too. And it's all going to start with education, right?
Yes.
Informing the public that this is something that is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So informing them that this is something that is needed.
Mm-hmm.
And again, your work is critical in making that sort of type of information available for people to understand. Which brings me to my last question. If people want to get in contact with you, or if they want to learn more about the research that you have conducted, where can they get that information and how can they get a hold of you?
Well, this particular paper we're talking about here is open. It is publicly available, so open source, and people could get my email from the information from that paper, and also my email if needed. We could use that.
Okay.
And our New York University Langone Health, we also have a public media department that is actually working with us closely in communication of our scientific findings too.
Wonderful. So we're going to be able to link your email and the links to the research into this video. That'd be wonderful. I appreciate that. And more than that, Dr. Yu, I really appreciate you coming in and explaining your program and explaining your research. I had a really great time talking with you today.
Thanks for having me.